What if a child's question changed everything? In the heart of New York City, where the lights never dim and the streets hum with endless energy, Ethan Sullivan thought he had his life figured out. A billionaire, tech mogul, and single father, he'd built an empire from the ground up, wealth, influence, and a penthouse view that stretched across the skyline. But beneath the polished surface, Ethan was a man adrift, raising his 9-year-old daughter, Sophie, alone after the tragic loss of his wife, Abigail, 3 years earlier. He'd once had everything, until the accident that stole Abigail away, leaving him with a void no amount of money could fill and a little girl who needed more than he knew how to give. Sophie, though, was a spark of light in Ethan's shadowed world. With her mother's boundless energy and a creative spirit all her own, she filled their home with drawings, vibrant sketches of imaginary worlds that spilled across every page of her sketchbook. Ethan often watched her, pencil in hand, lost in her art, and wondered what she saw in those lines and colors. Was she dreaming of a life he couldn't provide? A life with a mother she barely remembered? One chilly evening in March 2025, after a grueling day of meetings, Ethan decided to step away from the glitz of his usual haunts. He craved something simple, a break from the weight of his responsibilities. "How about dinner out? Just us?" he asked Sophie, forcing a smile. Her eyes lit up, and she nodded eagerly. They ended up at a small, unassuming diner on the city's edge, a place called Rosie's Kitchen, its faded sign barely legible against the weathered brick. Ethan had driven past it countless times, but never stopped. Tonight, though, it felt right. The moment they stepped inside, the warmth hit him. Freshly baked rolls, the sizzle of bacon, the soft clatter of dishes. It was a far cry from the sterile boardrooms and high-end restaurants he knew so well. Sophie tugged at his sleeve, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Dad, this place looks so cool. I bet they have amazing waffles." Ethan chuckled, the sound lighter than he'd expected. "Waffles, huh? Let's see if they're as good as you think." They slid into a booth by the window, the glow of streetlights painting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. Sophie pulled out her sketchbook, her pencil dancing across the page as Ethan skimmed the menu. He ordered waffles and orange juice for her, grilled salmon for himself, and settled back, watching her work. For a moment, the chaos of his life faded, replaced by the quiet rhythm of the diner. Then Sophie's voice cut through the calm. "Dad, do you think Mom's watching us from up there?" Her tone was serious, her eyes wide and searching. Ethan's chest tightened. He tapped his heart, forcing the words past the lump in his throat. "I think she's always with us, right here." Sophie nodded, returning to her drawing, but the question lingered. She'd been asking more about Abigail lately, her curiosity growing as she pieced together a past she couldn't fully grasp. Their food arrived, and Sophie barely glanced up, her focus locked on her sketch. Ethan watched her, noticing something different this time. The figure she was drawing, a woman with long auburn hair, warm eyes, and a gentle smile, felt oddly familiar. He brushed it off as a coincidence, not wanting to dwell on it. They ate in comfortable silence, the diner's hum wrapping around them like a blanket. But then everything shifted. Sophie slid out of the booth, her small frame moving with purpose toward the counter. Ethan blinked, startled, as she approached their waitress, a woman in her late 20s with tired eyes and a kind smile, and tugged at her apron. "Are you my mom?" Sophie asked, her voice soft but certain. Time stopped. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. He shot to his feet, crossing the room in seconds. "Sophie, honey, what are you doing?" he said, his voice tight. The waitress, her name tag read Nora, stared down at Sophie, her face paling. She stepped back, flustered, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker Ethan couldn't place. Confusion? Recognition? "She looks like her dad," Sophie insisted, gripping Nora's sleeve. "She looks like the lady in my dreams. She's my mom." Ethan knelt beside her, forcing a smile. "Sweetie, she's not your mom. She's just a nice lady who works here, okay?" Sophie nodded reluctantly, her brow furrowed, but Nora's reaction gnawed at him. She wasn't just surprised. She looked shaken, her hands trembling as she smoothed her apron. It's fine, Nora murmured, her voice unsteady. Kids say the sweetest things. Ethan apologized, guiding Sophie back to their booth. But the moment clung to him like damp air. The way Nora had looked at Sophie, it wasn't casual. There was something deeper, something unspoken. What had Sophie seen in her? And why had Nora reacted like that? A secret unraveled. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Sophie's question replayed in his mind, looping with Nora's haunted expression. Are you my mom? It was innocent, a child's whim, but it had struck a nerve. In that drawing, the woman with auburn hair kept tugging at his thoughts. Had Sophie met Nora before? No, that was impossible. Yet the unease wouldn't let go. The next morning, after dropping Sophie at school, Ethan found himself back at Rosie's kitchen. He told himself it was nothing, just a need to clear his head. But deep down, he knew better. He needed answers. The diner was quieter now, the breakfast crowd thinning. Nora was behind the counter, wiping it down, her movements mechanical. When she saw him, her eyes widened briefly before she masked it with a polite smile. Hi, Ethan said, his voice hesitant. Can we talk for a minute? Nora paused, then nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. Sure. Give me a sec. She led him to a corner table, away from the few lingering patrons. The air between them crackled with tension, heavy with words neither had spoken yet. Look, Ethan started, keeping his tone soft but firm. I'm sorry about last night. Sophie's been asking a lot about her mom lately. She lost her 3 years ago. She's just curious. But the way you reacted, it felt like more than surprise. I can't shake it. What did she see in you? Nora's gaze dropped, her fingers twisting the hem of her apron. She took a shaky breath, her voice barely audible. I don't know how to say this, Ethan. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But when Sophie looked at me and said that, it hit me hard. Like something inside me woke up. Ethan's pulse quickened. Woke up? What do you mean? Nora met his eyes, her expression raw. I think I might be connected to her. To you. In a way you don't understand yet. His mind blanked. Connected? To Sophie? To him? This woman was a stranger, a waitress he'd met less than 12 hours ago. What are you talking about? He pressed, leaning forward. Nora swallowed hard, her voice fragile. Your wife, Abigail, we were close once. Really close. Like sisters. She was there for me when I had nothing left. When I was pregnant, she helped me through it. She made me a promise that if anything happened to me, she'd take care of my child. Ethan's world tilted. Abigail? Pregnant? Nora's words crashed over him like a wave, pulling him under. Wait, he said, his voice hoarse. You're saying Abigail knew you? That she promised to take care of your child? What does that have to do with Sophie? Nora's eyes glistened with unshed tears. When Abigail died, I thought I'd lost everything she'd given me. Her support, her promise. But last night, when Sophie looked at me, it felt like she knew me. Like there was something between us I can't explain. I think she's the child Abigail swore to protect. Ethan's chest constricted. This couldn't be real. Sophie was his daughter, his and Abigail's. There was no way. And yet, Nora's words burrowed into him, stirring doubts he couldn't silence. Why didn't you ever say anything? He demanded, his voice rising. If this is true, why wait until now? Nora sighed, her shoulders slumping. I didn't want to disrupt your life, Ethan. You'd already lost so much. But after last night, I couldn't keep it from you. I think Sophie senses something I've ignored for too long. The diner faded around him, the clatter of dishes and hum of voices drowned out by the storm in his head. Abigail had known Nora. She'd made a promise. And Sophie, his bright, curious Sophie, might be tied to this woman in ways he'd never imagined. Was it possible? Could Nora be more than a stranger? And if she was, what did that mean for the life he'd built? The past resurfaces. Ethan left Rosie's kitchen in a daze, Nora's story echoing in his ears. Abigail had been his rock, his partner, the woman who'd grounded him through every storm. He thought he'd known her completely, every smile, every secret. But this? A bond with Nora, a promise to care for her child. It was a side of Abigail he'd never seen. And Sophie, was there more to her past than he'd ever suspected? Back at his penthouse, Ethan paced the living room, the city skyline glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Sophie was at school, oblivious to the upheaval her question had unleashed. He needed to understand. He needed the whole story. Nora had agreed to meet him again that afternoon, promising to tell him everything. When she arrived, her auburn hair tied back and her face etched with exhaustion, Ethan felt a pang of sympathy. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a woman carrying years of pain. They sat on the leather couch, a tense silence stretching between them. Finally, Nora spoke, her voice low and steady. "I wasn't always like this, Ethan. Broke, working shifts at a diner. I had a life once, a good one. I was in love with a man, older, wealthy. He promised me the world. I thought he meant it." Ethan listened, his hands clasped tightly. "What happened?" Nora's gaze drifted, lost in memory. "When I told him I was pregnant, everything changed. He didn't want a kid, not with me. He told me to get rid of it, said he wasn't ready to be tied down. When I refused, he walked away, left me with nothing, no home, no money, no hope." Ethan's stomach churned. The betrayal was raw, visceral. He knew loss, but this was different, a deliberate abandonment. "And Abigail?" Nora's voice softened, a faint smile touching her lips. "She was my miracle. I'd hit rock bottom, alone, scared, pregnant. Abigail found me, took me in. She didn't judge, didn't ask questions. She just helped. She promised that if anything happened to me, she'd make sure my daughter was safe." Ethan's mind raced. Abigail's kindness didn't surprise him. She'd always had a heart bigger than he could measure. But this promise... "So what are you saying?" "That's Sophie." Nora cut in, her voice trembling. "I don't know, Ethan. I lost my daughter after Abigail died. I couldn't keep her. I was a mess. Abigail had already taken her in, raised her as her own. When I saw Sophie last night, it felt like she was mine. Like Abigail kept her promise in a way I never expected." The room spun. Ethan gripped the armrest, his knuckles white. "You're telling me Sophie might be your daughter? That Abigail adopted her?" Nora nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I think so. I don't have proof. Not yet. But the way she looked at me, the way she knew me, it's more than coincidence." Ethan's world shattered. Sophie, his Sophie, might not be his by blood. The thought was unbearable, yet pieces clicked into place. Abigail's secrecy, Sophie's questions, Nora's reaction. "Why didn't Abigail tell me?" he whispered. "She didn't want to burden you," Nora said. "She knew how much you wanted a family. She thought she could handle it herself, give you the life you deserved without dragging you into my mess." Ethan stood, pacing again, his emotions a tangled mess. Anger, grief, love, they warred inside him. If this was true, Abigail had lied to him, not out of malice, but out of love. And Nora, she wasn't just a stranger. She was a link to his daughter's past, a piece of Abigail's legacy. "I need time," he said finally, his voice rough. "I need to figure this out, for Sophie's sake." Nora nodded, wiping her eyes. "I'll help however I can. For her. For Abigail." As she left, Ethan sank onto the couch, staring at Sophie's latest drawing on the coffee table. A family, him, Sophie, and a woman with auburn hair. His heart ached. What did Sophie know that he didn't? A new truth emerges. Days passed in a blur. Ethan wrestled with Nora's revelation, torn between disbelief and a growing certainty. He watched Sophie closely, her laughter, her sketches, the way she lit up around Nora during their visits to Rosie's. The bond was undeniable, a thread he couldn't cut even if he wanted to. One evening, as Sophie doodled at the kitchen table, she looked up at him, her eyes bright. "Dad, I drew us again. You, me, and Nora. We're a family, right?" Ethan's breath caught. The drawing was simple but piercing. 3 figures holding hands, smiles on their faces. "Sophie," he said, his voice thick. "Why Nora?" "She's nice," Sophie replied, shrugging. "She makes me feel safe. Like Mom did." The words broke him. He couldn't deny it anymore. Sophie needed Nora, just as she needed him. Abigail had seen it, had planned for it. That night, he called Nora over, ready to face the truth together. "I've been thinking," he said as they sat in the dim light of his living room, "about what you said, about Abigail's promise. I don't know if I'm ready for this, but Sophie is. She sees you as family, and I think Abigail wanted that too." Nora's eyes widened, hope flickering in them. "Ethan, I never take her from you. I just want to be there for both of you." He nodded, a weight lifting. "Then let's do this. Together. For Sophie." Sophie ran in then, throwing her arms around Nora. "You're staying?" she asked, beaming. Nora hugged her back, tears in her eyes. "Yeah, kiddo, I am staying." Ethan watched them, a bittersweet peace settling over him. This wasn't the family he'd planned, but it was the one Abigail had dreamed of, a family forged not just by blood, but by love and promises kept. Epilogue, a new beginning. Weeks later, at Rosie's kitchen, Ethan, Nora, and Sophie sat in their usual booth, sharing waffles and laughter. The diner's owner, Hank, grinned as he brought their order. "You three look good together," he said warmly. Ethan smiled, his hand resting on Sophie's sketchbook. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still questions, still healing to do. But for the first time in years, he felt whole. Nora wasn't just a piece of the past. She was their future. And Sophie? She was the heart of it all, binding them together in a way only a child could. The story wasn't over. Challenges loomed, secrets lingered. But as they sat there, a family born from loss and rediscovery, Ethan knew one thing. They'd face it together.